This story is based on official reports and eyewitness accounts. And this is the story of Varig Flight 254. On the evening of September 3, 1989, Guarulhos International Airport, Sao Paulo, Brazil. The Varig Flight 254, which is a Boeing 737-200 aircraft, is currently being prepared for a journey to Belém, the capital city of the state of Pará located in the northern region of Brazil. Flight 254 was a route with multiple stops that was operated by Varig using their Boeing 737 airplanes in 1989. The total duration of the Sao Paulo-Belém route, including stopovers, was approximately 8 hours and 20 minutes. The captain of Flight 254 was Captain Cesar Augusto Padula Garces, who was 32 years old. Before joining Varig in 1982, he had flown for the Brazilian Air Force for several years. He had accumulated almost 7,000 hours of flying experience, with almost 1,000 of those hours flying the 737 aircraft. The first officer of Flight 254 was a 29-year-old pilot Nilson de Souza Zil, who had joined Varig just over a year ago. Pilot Zil was a very new pilot, with only 800 hours of flight experience. In addition to the pilots, there were 4 flight attendants on board Flight 254. The aircraft was an 14-years-old Boeing 737-200 and registered AS Papa Victor Mike Kilo. It was really safe and reliable. Flight 254 took off from Guarulhos International Airport in Sao Paulo at 9:43 local time. After about 7 hours, Flight 254 made all the intermediate stops without any problems. By evening, the pilots safely landed in Maraba despite a thick smoke caused by the local agriculture practice of slash and burn. At 17:20, the crew of Flight 254 was completing the final preparations at the ramp. It was the pilots' final flight of the day, and they were expecting to land in Belém before sunset. In Maraba Airport, some passengers disembarked and new passengers boarded the final leg of the flight to Belém, which was a brief, less than 40-minute flight to the north. The captain prepared the plane for the flight to Belém while the first officer checked the plane outside. The captain checked the printed flight plan produced by the airline to find the right direction to fly to Belém because there was no designated airway marked on their charts. As they were preparing the cockpit for departure, the crew made a crucial mistake. Unfortunately, they failed to recognize the mistake, which would soon put the lives of everyone on board in danger. The printed flight plan contained all the necessary information, including the heading to Belém, which was printed as 0270. The captain read the printed flight plan and thought the heading to Belém was 270 degrees. He adjusted the plane's navigation instrument to reflect that heading. The captain enters the destination into the aircraft's performance management system to get information on the remaining distance to the destination and fuel. A little while later, the first officer comes back to his seat, but instead of checking his own flight plan to set his navigation, he looks at the captain's indicator and adjusts his own to match it. When the flight doors are closed, there are a total of 54 individuals on board, consisting of 48 passengers and 6 crew members. At 5:30 p.m. that evening, Flight 254 left the gate at Maraba and headed towards the runway. The passengers were in a rush to reach Belém as soon as possible because the Brazilian football team was playing against Chile that evening to decide which country would participate in the 1990 World. The passengers' focus on the football match would soon fade away as their short flight turns into a fight for survival. Let's take a short break. We've put a lot of effort into this video, and if you find it useful and informative, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching. Just after 5:30, Flight 254 takes off from Maraba. As an uncontrolled airport without a tower, there is no air traffic controller to monitor the flight's departure. The only person providing advisory information is a radio operator stationed in a small building out of sight from the runway. After takeoff, the autopilot is engaged and the aircraft is directed to a heading of 270 degrees. As Flight 254 climbed to its cruising altitude of 29,000 feet, everything appeared to be normal in the cockpit. Despite the short duration of the flight, the aircraft would remain at this altitude for only a few minutes before beginning its descent towards Belém. When the captain thinks the plane is near the destination, he tries to contact the Belém tower using the VHF radio. He got no response. He tried again a few more times, but he still did not receive any response. Since the captain couldn't communicate with Belém Airport directly, he used another Varig aircraft operating Flight 266 as a radio relay to talk to Belém Airport. The captain talks to Belém Airport and asks permission to start descending, and they allow it. Flight 254 reaches an altitude of 20,000 feet and maintains that level shortly after. The captain realizes that he is unable to identify any familiar landmarks or geographical features in the Belém area, which strikes him as strange. The pilots look out the cockpit windows, but they are unable to see any recognizable landmarks or the city of Belém. The pilots couldn't see the city, only the rough shape of the land below them with smoke and the setting sun. The captain talks to the tower controller and asks if there is a power outage in the city, as he cannot see any lights or signs of civilization. In 1989, Belém Airport did not have radar installed yet. Therefore, the controller notifies Flight 254 that there are no other planes in their airspace and grants them permission to land. Everyone on board has a feeling that something is not right, but they are not able to identify the problem. Flight 254, still flying at 20,000 feet, reaches the point in its journey where the flight computers indicate that the plane should be above Belém. The only thing visible below the aircraft is a vast expanse of rainforest shrouded in smoke. The flight computer shows that Flight 254 has already passed its destination, prompting Captain Garces to make a 180-degree turn to locate Belém visually. The captain decides to lower the altitude of the aircraft to 4,000 feet and decrease its speed to 200 knots. The captain, hesitant to use the VHF radio for assistance, chooses to rely on visual cues and spots a river beneath the aircraft that he thinks is the Amazon, using it as a reference point. The river that the captain takes visual reference from, thinking it to be the Amazon, is actually the Xingu. At this point, the flight has already exceeded its scheduled duration by 30 minutes, causing anxiety among the passengers. The pilots soon realize that they have made a serious mistake while reviewing the flight documents. The pilots realized that they had taken off with a heading of 270 degrees, but the correct heading from Maraba to Belém was supposed to be 027 degrees. The pilots realized that they have been flying towards the west instead of the north. All along, they had been flying in the wrong direction, heading deep into the Amazon rainforest. The reason why the pilots cannot detect the signal from the Belém VOR is that they have never flown close enough to the city, and the VOR transmitters are out of their range. The pilots had made a serious error, possibly the worst mistake of their professional and personal lives. The captain and first officer, upon realizing their error, decide to establish communication with Santarém Airport, as they believe it to be the nearest airport to their current location. But after calculating their fuel consumption, the captain realizes they don't have enough fuel to reach Santarém. Therefore, he decides to change course and head south. The captain then speaks to the passengers over the intercom.
Senhores passageiros do comandante que vos fala. Tivemos uma pane de desorientação do nosso sistema de bússola. Estamos com o nosso combustível já no final, ainda com 15 minutos. Pedimos a todos que mantenham a calma, porque uma situação como essa realmente foi difícil de acontecer. Deixamos a todos a esperança de que isso não passe de apenas susto para todos nós. Atenção, muito obrigado e todos.
The captain decides to go to Carajás Airport, as he realizes there is not enough fuel to reach Belém. At this point, the flight comes close to a large airfield that is within 100 nautical miles, and the 737 is capable of making it to the airfield. The pilots started to feel hopeless as they knew they would soon run out of fuel and there would be nothing to prevent a crash in the Amazon rainforest. The pilots choose to maintain an altitude of 8,000 feet until they exhaust their fuel to prevent the risk of an explosion during landing. The pilots watched nervously as the fuel gauges approached empty. At 2040, Garces informs the Belém Center that he will perform a forced landing over the jungle. At 9 o'clock, when the aircraft had around 100 kilograms of fuel left, the left engine shuts down. Less than a minute later, the right engine shut down as well. Without engines, the plane lost electrical power, causing all of the pilot's instruments to stop working, except for a few small standby instruments. The cockpit has only 4 operational instruments, namely the artificial horizon, altimeter, airspeed indicator, and vertical speed indicator. The 54 passengers and crew had only 5 minutes left before facing their fate in the rainforest. At 9:06 p.m. local time, the plane made a belly landing in the jungle 1,050 miles northwest of Rio de Janeiro. Unfortunately, 12 people on board the flight did not survive the impact. The trees helped slow down the plane before it hit the ground. As there was no fuel on the aircraft, there was no explosion or fire after the impact. The pilots survived the crash. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the crash was primarily caused by the flight crew's negligence. The investigation revealed that the airplane was in excellent condition for the flight. The investigation determined that the primary cause of the accident was a mistake made by the commander in accurately reading the correct heading from the flight plan. This mistake was made worse by the co-pilot copying the heading from the commander's panel instead of cross-checking it with the flight plan. Varig used a standardized flight planning system for all its aircraft, which caused the flight crew to misread the correct heading from the flight plan as 0270 instead of 27.0 degrees. The airline's training program had informed pilots about this particularity. Captain Garces was on vacation when the standard was changed, so he misinterpreted the value expressed in the flight plan as 270 degrees instead of 27.0 degrees. Garces and Zil were sentenced to 4 years in prison, but it was later changed to community service. Flight 254's tragic story serves as a lesson on how crucial it is for pilots to remain vigilant and use common sense in the cockpit. In memory of the 12 people who lost their lives in the Varig Flight 254 tragedy.